Apyayantu mamangani vakpranashakshushrota balamindriyani cha sarvani maham brahma upanishadam maham brahma nirakuryam mama brahma nirakarot anirakaranam astvanirakaranam me astu tadatmani nirateya upanishadsu dharmaste mayi santu te mayi santu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Chapter 5 is about what does it really mean to renounce the world without running away or without appearing cold or apathetic. That's the incorrect way to renounce. Okay? And we also said chapter 5 is about being psychologically or mentally independent of the world. Because that's the essence of freedom, to be psychologically or mentally free from various circumstances that usually would be important, right? If I don't have them, then my life is not worth living. So this is freedom from anything that would otherwise produce that kind of emptiness. You know, the emptiness when we want something and our life is not full enough because we don't have what's important. So freedom from that, freedom from the need to fill one's life with objects, with people, with entertainment, with circumstances which give meaning or purpose or a sense of worthiness to one's existence. So renunciation is being free from these needs. Now, verse 22 to 23 that we're about to do, and 24. So the goal today is 22 to 24, okay? Verse 22 to 23 is about mental preparedness or discipline required for self-knowledge. What kind of mental preparedness? That will be answered. What does it mean to be mentally prepared? That will be answered. What is this? Who is this discipline for? That will be answered. In what way are these disciplines undertaken? That will also be answered, okay? In 22 and 23. And verse 24 will be about jnanam palam, that is the fruit of self-knowledge. So once we go through the discipline, like with anything, right? In sports, you train, and then you go to the field, and then you do your high jump, right? Your sprint or your swimming, and then you win. Or maybe you just have fun. So that's the benefit of mental preparation. Verse 22. Yehi samsparshaja bhoga dukkha yonnaya evate adyanta vanta kaunteya nate shuramate buddhaha. Krishna is here sharing a basic universal problem that all human beings go through. And we will now speak about this universal problem that no one is an exception from. Okay? So to remove this problem, this universal problem, is to come out of samsara. To not remove this problem is for samsara to continue for the individuals. Samsara means, in this context, entanglements. Okay? Entanglements with the world. Every sense object makes contact with sense organ. Okay? So sense object is anything that we can perceive. Absolutely anything, including your own body, your own feelings, your own emotions, your family, right? Even this, you're perceiving this board. So this is an object because it is known to you. It's perceived by you. Okay? Thoughts are also objects. Good point. Okay? Object is anything other than you. It's the Sakshi. In the world, we use our sense organs, our 5 sense organs, that is the organ of visual, organ of auditory, gustatory, olfactory, and kinesthetic. Okay? So these 5 organs pick up data from the world. And this data which they pick up is how we're able to perceive the world. If we, for example, were to take one of these organs out, let's say the visual, then the world would still continue, except the world would be with one less piece of data, that is the visual. Thoughts, then we're talking about subtle sense organs, because gross sense organs are used to pick up the world, right? But subtle sense organs are used to pick up the internal world. So it's the same idea. Just like if you imagine something, then you will know about what you imagined. How do you know about it? Because it is made aware in the mind. Okay? So sense organs all culminate where? In the mind. Okay? So the data right now, the visual data, is coming through your eyes, and the hearing of this mouth sound is coming to your ears. And the visual and the auditory are culminating in the mind. So the mind is used to culminate all of the data that is processed by these sense organs. And that's why we say the mind is the antaha karana. Antaha means innermost cause, innermost instrument. So that means your mind is that place which takes the data from one of the 5 senses and makes sense of it. So any object so far in the world is capable of giving the person pleasure or fulfillment. We know this from our own experience. And everyone has an individual object in life that gives them pleasure, okay? Now this pleasure, this word bhoga means happiness, okay? It's just like sukham. You've heard the word sukham, sukha dukkha. So bhoga is a synonym for sukham. So when it says samsparshaja bhoga, what that means is all pleasures in life, every single pleasure in life, are arising out of contact between these 2 parts, the sense organs and the sense objects, okay? So all pleasure in the world is born out of the contact between these 2. If we take the visual away, then you got a whole entertainment industry. We're talking about a $1 trillion industry called movies, which could no longer function. If we take out the auditory, then you got a whole $1 trillion industry called the music industry, which could no longer function. If we take out the kinesthetic sense, then we would take out the entire trillion or however many $1 billion industry called the red light district for the, in men's case, for women also have their own versions, like massage. You can think about it in a way that the entire world functions by simply profiting off one of our 5 senses, right? So imagine we just didn't have eyes, right? All of the cinemas would go out of business, and YouTube and everything else. So then we will over depend on our auditory sense, right? So even the auditory today has pleasing music, sounds of nature, sounds of the forest. Nevertheless, they are depending on that which is given by Ishvara. Okay, so this is one of those reasons why, to be careful if one indulges, right? Even in the Shastra it says, if one indulges in food and just goes, this is the luxuries of life, that's actually quite disrespectful because, in a certain context, because it's kind of like disregarding the giver of the sense which allows me to enjoy, right? So if I just keep enjoying, but I never acknowledge the giver who gave me these senses which are causing me or which have the capacity to make me experience this, then it's actually being like a thief, right? Taking something without ever acknowledging it for its capability. Okay, so far we have established that the mere presence of just the sense organs or just the sense objects is not going to produce a result. Okay, we need both for experience, for human experience to happen. Problem is, every pleasure in life, which is because of some sparshaja bhoga, which is the contact, the happiness arising between the sense organs and the sense objects, every pleasure in life is mixed with pain. So that's where this is going. And this fact is simply unavoidable no matter who or what position one may be in. Okay? Pain has 3 levels, and each level increases in intensity. Okay? We have pain of acquisition, we have pain of maintenance, and we have pain of departure, okay, or pain of loss. So pain of acquisition is common. We all know, we all share the experience, what it means to acquire something, like have a goal or a vision in life. And then the amount of work that we need to go through, it can be quite exhausting, right? And sometimes it's not really, sometimes it's enjoyable. But nevertheless, acquiring something is, you know, it has its pain and pleasure, right? For example, to acquire a new partner has both pain and pleasure involved. Now, the second kind of pain that we go through is to maintain what we acquired. So now that I have the object, the reality is the object is constantly undergoing changes, and I end up depending on this object. So in order to preserve the object's status, I need to maintain its condition. So this can come up as like a person who's over-controlling in a relationship. Happens because they don't want the other person to change out of their liking, because the condition is what they depend on. Okay, and so this causes constant struggle between the two, or even business partners, right? Any kind of situation, and it's actually very painful. It can be a whole life of turmoil and conflict trying to maintain each other, right? One doesn't want to lose the other, or even a business. To try to maintain a business, competitors are constantly outranking in the search engines, so one has to, you know, get new SEO specialists and find new ways of marketing, and even one's knowledge, right? If you acquire knowledge, let's say you specialize in something, and let's say you take a break for 2 months, what happens when you come back, right? Most of that knowledge, or some parts at least, have been gone with the memory, right? Gone with the wind. So then we have to remember, we have to revise the knowledge. So there is a certain aspect of pain involved in maintenance. And the biggest intensity of pain is loss. Okay. Loss is when it finally, especially if we're dependent on it, finally goes. It's no more in our life. Let's say one's house, where is it? Is it in China or India, where the houses are being destroyed and new buildings are being built because the space is running out?
That's everywhere.
Yeah, everywhere, right? Well, most places, at least that I've seen. Now imagine being an owner of a house and suddenly getting the news that you got to move out, no matter one way or another. 20-year-old house, all your history is in there. That's very painful. Family members, that's very painful. Okay? So this means the biggest pain that we experience is when we lose something or someone. So the conclusion is, there is no such thing as pure pleasure or pain in the world. That's a fantasy. In reality, just down-to-earth reality, every pain pleasure has a hidden opposite behind it. And the reason is because all pleasures even pains, but all pleasures have a beginning and then they end. There's no point putting all one's energy into the preservation, into the acquisition and constant process of these first two, because there's going to be a loss, there's going to be acquisition pain, and there's going to be maintenance pain, right? The smart ones are going to say, hey, what about, because not all losses are painful, right? Sometimes we lose a person, sometimes they get out of our life and then we're happy. Yeah, departure usually is painful. But in this case, departure would be happy because somebody left us who we didn't want, or it wasn't getting along with them. So what's the opposite of that? The opposite is if they come, then the arrival becomes painful. So whether you want to speak of arrival being pleasurable and departure being painful, or you want to speak of departure being pleasurable and arrival being painful, either way, as I said, there is no such thing as pure pleasure or fulfillment in the world. The point of saying this is that all objects, okay, all objects, whichever nature of that object is, you have to acknowledge that it shares these two sides, pain and pleasure behind it. If one does not acknowledge that, then the modification of that object's status or condition is going to immediately invoke feelings of loss or feelings of preservation. And that's going to create a trail that's now going to steal one's time from doing something worthwhile. Right? That's the problem, is that pain doesn't go away instantly, does it? There's a trail behind it, like in the trails in the sky. So these trails stay in the mind and they steal the attention and the time from the individual of performing something better and potentially coming to an opportunity which would otherwise serve them very well. But they're too busy worrying from the trail, thus they're unable to attend to what has to happen next. Okay? So that means you need to acknowledge right from the start that any experience in the world, irrespective of its relationship or your relationship with it, no matter how beautiful, there is a pain and pleasure behind it. Hang around with anyone, even the greatest of the greatest rishis, there will still be pleasure and pain behind it. Because sometimes they say something that doesn't appease your raga dvesha, sometimes they say something that appeases the raga dvesha. So there's a constant pain and pleasure cycle going on. Okay, now let's talk about the solution which the world applies but doesn't work. Okay, so we're going to talk about a solution of the world and demonstrate why it doesn't work before we go to the Vedanta solution. If the person decides to possess or have objects in their life, then the fastest way to have this pleasure is to get the object. That's the fastest, easiest way, right? I don't have it, go and get it. I don't have the house, go and get the house. Just work for it, do whatever it is, guaranteed. The problem with this is, so I say this is a solution, but there's a problem behind it. The problem is the person, whoever it is willing to accept the rose or the fragrance of the rose, but hardly willing to accept the thorn that comes with the rose. Okay? Sometimes we're not willing to accept the thorn because, think about a lottery winner, right? They're too busy being excited and overwhelmed by the joy, but nobody stops and thinks, well, I'm not going to say nobody, but few stop and think and say, wait a minute, what's the price of this, right? Because now I'm going to buy things and I'm going to deal with what I buy, that I'm going to undergo these three pains: acquisition, preservation, and loss. Okay? So one has to then go through this pain because they haven't taken the time to accept the thorns which came with the rose. Okay, the second way that the world, assuming they don't have the full picture, is what we call a smart spiritualist, a smart person. Okay, so what they say is this: I'm just not going to own anything. I'm just going to be free and simple, right? I'm just going to, like, who needs the world, right? It's just painful. So they're right in one aspect, but it's over-exaggerated in another. Here's why. If I decide to keep my life simple, right? Not get married, not have children, just very simple, just enough to survive. What happens is a feeling of loss, emptiness starts to arise. The person starts to crave for some novelty, for some fullness in life. It's a very common thing. We say oh, my life is so empty, right? I've got nothing to do. So then they have a yearning to fill their life with something interesting. So this means because they decided not to be with the worldly entanglements, they then bear having to fantasize to fill in the gap of emptiness. And what is fantasy? What is imagination? Tamaguna. So either way, they haven't gotten out of the problem. Because even entertaining thoughts with my mind, I am still focusing on objects. So I haven't really renounced anything. I've only renounced physically, but I haven't renounced mentally. Okay, so these two problems equate to summary. Number one, a lot of work. Okay, because number one, if you want to be in the worldly objects, there's a lot of work with that, right? To maintain it. A lot of work equals complain, right? And no work, that's for a false renunciate, equals boredom. So either way, they haven't really gotten anything. Number one, I'm with worldly things, but there's a lot of work, right? I've got to work with the kids, the family, the bills. There's so much work. Complain, there's so much work. If I do the other way, then I say there's no work. I'm bored. So both ways, 1 and 2 equals samsara. Still entangled in the primary problem of thinking about more for more, okay? Now let's talk about the Vedanta solution. Okay. Number 1, decide not to possess anything. If you're in this category right now, okay, because I'm talking about the solution from Vedanta. If you're in this category now to keep life very simple, and you're just not generally interested in the world, right? Not that the world's being discarded or degraded. You're just not generally interested in what's out there. Then what one has to do is discover their inner fulfillment. Discover the fulfillment of self. Discover inner ananda. Okay? And we can call this, there's a word for this, purnatvam. Purna, purnamada. So purna means complete and whole. And tvam, tatvam, that means though. So that means learn to be happy with your fullness. Purnatvam. Purna, full, tvam, you Atman. That means learn to be happy with your fullness, with yourself. So that means, once again, summary, if one chooses to live a simple life, solution, learn to be happy by yourself, no matter what. Otherwise, the problem is one's going to become bored and have that emptiness problem. Number 2, if one chooses to have a busy life and possess things, okay, if we choose to continue a business and friends and job, first, acknowledge that pleasure and pain is going to come with any kind of involvement with the object which I happen to be transacting with. No exceptions to this. First, acknowledge. And the second is, this is the most important. Okay, discover or develop sufficient mental strength to deal with the consequential or eventual loss or pain of the object which you happen to be transacting with. I'll shorten that down. Discover sufficient inner strength. Discover sufficient mental strength to deal with the eventual pain dealing with the object which I am dealing with. So what does that mean? two partners are together, there's tension. That's going to happen whether one likes it or not. Discover and develop the mental strength to sustain that, not to run away, right? To stay and be okay with it. Why? Because there is no way out of this pain-pleasure side dealing with an object. I said this from the beginning. That's why I say discover the mental strength and develop it in order to stay with the situation without having too much of a mental disturbance. Along with that, you need to do what the sannyasi does, which is learn to be happy with yourself. Okay? Because remember, sannyasi doesn't have this problem. Or it's not a problem. Let's not call it a problem. Sannyasi doesn't have to deal with the world. So they don't need to discover inner mental strength because they're fine. So as a householder, you got two parts. One, discover sufficient mental strength to deal with the eventual pain dealing with the objects in your life. And two, purnatvam. There's no other way. For example, children, 1 year old, there's going to be challenges for the parents at 1 year old. At 2 years old, there's going to be challenges for the parents. So that means the parent at 1 has to develop and sustain the mental strength to undergo the challenges of the child. At child being 2, they have to undergo and sustain their mental strength to sustain the child. When the child starts talking, 2.5 or 3, is it? 2.5, 3? Then the problems or the challenges will increase, and then the parent needs to sustain, keep discovering, keep developing one's inner mental strength. Especially if they're coming back from work tired, and then the dog starts to lick them, and they're trying to work on the laptop, and then the cat goes over the laptop, accidentally presses enter, and then the wrong money gets sent to somebody else. Okay, so many, and then on top of that, the wife is not cooking for an extra 1 hour, and they're hungry. So all of this has to be sustained. How? By this constantly working and developing sufficient mental strength to deal with the constant transactions of objects of the world. If we don't have solution to 1 and 2, then get ready for pain. Because there will be pain. There will be pain both ways, but at least this prepares you. This is why I said verse 22 is discipline or mental preparedness. So now you know what we're talking about, okay? How to discover purnatvam. That's the next topic. How to discover inner fulfillment. Luckily, both methods, number 1, which was giving up plus purnatvam, that's a summary. And number 2 was possessing plus mental strength plus purnatvam. Okay, that's a summary. If I want to possess, then I need mental strength and I need purnatvam. That's number 2. If I want number 1, just renounce, then I only need purnatvam. Okay? Both ways have only one solution, luckily. And that's and that solution is self-knowledge. Jnanam. So this is actually nothing new. It's just a repetition of what we already know in a different method. It's reassuring that it's not so mystical. Wow, what's the solution? Bring it on. We already know the solution. Self-knowledge. Okay, let's summarize this. If I'm ignorant, then if I have or don't have equals problems. If I'm wise, then having or not having equals no problemo. Okay? Now, when I say no problemo, I'm not talking about coldness or apathy. It's just that the person understands, hey, look, I've gone through something much tougher before. Everyone goes through this, right? It's subject to change anyway. I'm not going to die. It's not as bad as I think it is. Why shouldn't it happen? Why am I so special that it shouldn't happen? So one's just understanding that it's not as bad as it actually is. Okay, so we need to get back down to earth. It's not like the person's invincible. Okay, verse 23. Shaknoti haiva yasodhum praksharira vimokshanat kama krodhod bhavan vegam sayukta sasukhi naraha. Verse 23. Before going, summary, verse 22 that we just done. We talked about the value of mental preparedness, of what we need to do giving up, or choosing to possess. These are the only two options. What do we say in the first session? Grahastha ashrama and sannyasi ashrama. So it's the same idea. One's a householder, one's a sannyasi. This verse talks about how to handle raga dvesha. I would put that down because I'm going to add on to this now. How to handle raga, R long A, G A, raga, dash dvesha, D-V-E-S-A. Handling of raga dvesha. On top of raga, put kama, K long A, M-A. Okay, it's here, kama. And on top of dvesha, put krodha, K-R-O-D-H-A. Because I'm going to equate this now to some terms. Okay. Raga, we can say attractions, and dvesha is repulsions. Raga is likes, dvesha is dislikes. Also for dvesha, we can say aversions. Both raga and dvesha are caused by false notion that likes and dislikes are found in objects of the world. They are born out of false notions that raga, dvesha are contained in worldly objects. So let's speak about raga a little bit more. So you can put a new line, raga, just to address this very well. Okay, raga is, raga, R long A, G A. Raga is the false notion that the world is capable of giving me permanent happiness and fulfillment. That's the big word, permanent. The world will give me permanent happiness and fulfillment. Now, the word permanent, imagine this. Imagine going on a date, right? And you tell the other person, sitting on the other side of the table, you know what? Statistically speaking, based on the individuals of our age, with our caliber and with our skills and with our experience, the statistical rate of us lasting more than 2 years would be around 10 to 15%. So it is over 85% chance that we will separate within 2 years. Who's going to go with that? Who's going to continue? Right? The person was being honest, right? There's obviously you can use a different example. But why do we associate with things? Why do we get things in the first place? Because there is a false notion that in their presence, this will last forever, permanent. You've heard, what is it? True love eternal. Never dies? Huh? Eternal. Yeah, that one. What? Eternal. True love is eternal. There's terms that go around. True love.
I thought it was true love is blind.
Yeah. Okay, so permanency is the problem. And somehow we get this notion that by my engagement with this object, the pleasure, the fulfillment that I will gain with it will be permanent. The truth is, if you investigate your experience, there is no such thing as permanent joy in any kind of object in the world. No exception. That's the first understanding, the first acceptance. In other words, no person or no object can give you permanent security or fulfillment or happiness. Temporarily, yes, but permanent, impossible. The word dvesha, this is a new line now. The word dvesha is the false notion that the world is capable of giving me sorrow. False notion that the sorrow that I experience is because of the world. This is not true, because suppose I like classical music and I open the windows and I really turn on the classical music, and the next door neighbor doesn't like it, right? They have krodha. Oh, by the way, krodha means also anger. Did you put that? Kama, I said, kama is also desire. Kama, desire, krodha, anger. So loud music, next door neighbor, I have kama for the classical music. The next door neighbor has krodha, anger. But then tomorrow they turn on a loud, give me a genre.
Death metal.
Heavy metal. Okay. Loud, like with bass. You know, just you can't hide, right? Even in those trees you hear. And they're in bliss, man. They're dancing. But I'm totally in krodha. Well, my body's in krodha. So this means that the worldly sorrows are not in the world, they are in my own dvesha, in my own dislikes. Because what happened if I, at some point 2 years ago, somehow fell in love with heavy metal? Then in this same situation, I would enjoy the heavy metal. So the heavy metal and the classical music has nothing to do with the reality producing sorrow, but the reality producing sorrow belongs to my own dvesha. Okay? So false notion that the world's sorrows belong to the world is dvesha. It is I who make the world the source of joy and sorrow. It is I who am the source of all worldly joys and sorrows. Until I discover this, I will blame. No doubt. There will be blaming. Somebody else is responsible for this emotion, for this feeling that I'm having. No matter how good the relationship is with that object, if I don't accept this, that I am the source of sorrow and joy, then there will be even subtle blaming. It may not be so obvious, but there's sophisticated, very subtle, undetectable blaming. And that's going to be pointed to the object which enacted my dvesha, my raga. Right? Just like that heavy metal person, so I'm going to point the krodha, the anger, towards that person. And what will happen is, if I don't accept the statement, I will try to change the world. Why? To accommodate my raga dvesha. Changing the world means not only a personal small world, like in a house or in the community, but also with other colleagues at work. And there are, of course, extreme versions of really going massive, like let's change the world, let's come together and change the world. Okay, why? Because I haven't accepted that the source of joys and sorrows belong to me and not the world. So, when we recognize this truth, that the source of joys and sorrows belong to I, not the world, not to anyone else ever. Nobody ever was responsible for your anger or your agitation or your lack of success, or not even parents. Nobody. Zero. It was my own raga dvesha, my own preferences as to what is worthy of being liked and what is worthy of being or seen as disliked. Okay? So it puts back the responsibility on us.
What about environmental things? So people become aware of
chemicals or things in the environment that are systemic. So in other words, it's not just localized to one person but to the whole society. And they become ill or they find it difficult to work or something like that.
Yeah.
Yet the powers that be mean that won't change quickly. That's not likely to change quickly.
Yeah.
So the person themselves may not have the education or understanding to identify that their illness or their discomfort is associated with this thing. Other people might, and they agitate against that corporation or that government that's allowing that to go ahead.
Okay, the question is the intensity will still depend on the raga dvesha. There's also people who can forgive instantly and understand look at it from a different point of view, that I was meant to be here. Maybe it's my prarabdha karma, maybe it's my karma, but also the intensity is going to change, because if I have a strong aversion for the environmental impact giving me discomfort, then I'm going to, of course, be very angry. If I have not such of a aversion, but just a little bit, then I'm not going to show it so much. But it still comes from whom? Me. Did somebody else provoke me? No, it's coming out of whom? You. Is that clear? So I'm not saying that you're not allowed to have raga dvesha. I'm only saying to look at it and from whom is it coming from? Okay? I didn't say you're not supposed to have raga dvesha, just not to have it over dominating one's temperament. And even if somebody does something terrible to me, then what's the point of bearing that hurt? Why should I bear that hurt? Because I'm going to suffer. So it's in it for me to forgive. It's in it for me to look at it from a point of view that releases both them and me so that we can both continue our journeys. You understand?
So that doesn't necessarily mean that when something is perceived as suffering, as that would be, that you have to just passively accept that suffering and try to then develop a mental state to not be agitated by that suffering. But you can actually take proactive action, but in a correct way.
Very good put. Yeah, you can take proactive action, as Martin said, in a different way. You look at it in a different way, okay? Either way, what I'm saying is it always goes back to you. Yes, okay, they may be at fault, they may be absolutely... It really doesn't matter. The point is you're still bearing that result, okay? So when we accept the statement that all joys and sorrows actually come from me, and I am the source of them, then we can say that raga dvesha has been, I'll explain this word, transcended. Now, what does transcended mean? Transcended does not mean completely impervious or invincible. Transcended means simply I understand that it doesn't have such a strong hold on me. Okay? So yes, they're still there, raga dvesha is still there, but I'm not bound by them. Some of us have these grudges, right? And we hold them for such a long time, and we get blocked by the grudges. So I refuse to be bound by any kind of grudges towards anyone or anything, even if they have intentionally done it to me, because the fact is that grudge alone is an obstacle to my spiritual evolution. For that reason, if I understand and come back to the statement, I alone am the source of joys and sorrows, then it allows me to, quote, transcend these raga dveshas, these attractions and repulsions, because if I don't, then they're gonna drive me. They're gonna decide what I like and what I don't like. They're gonna choose what kind of life I have. Okay, we'll put this into a nice formula, mathematical formula. With raga dvesha, I will write this down. With raga dvesha, in brackets you can put ajnani, non-wise person. When I say non-white person, I'm not insulting anyone. I'm just saying one who is hasn't got the full education. With raga dvesha equals subjective world of mind. Subjective world of mind. So what I just said was, with likes and dislikes, there is a subjective world of mind. On top of subjective, these two words are super important. The first one is jiva srishti, J long I V A, jiva, and then dash S-R-S-T-I, srishti, S-R-S-T-I, comma, pratibhasika, P-R long A, T-I, prati, B-H, long A, S-I-K-A, pratibhasika. Okay? So subjective world equals jiva srishti or pratibhasika. It's probably super important words, especially pratibhasika. So, what does subjective world mean? It means this. Sunrise equals so beautiful. Rainbow equals, oh, it makes me so cheerful. Did you just get what I just said? I generated my own opinion and I wallpapered it over the object. Because somebody else doesn't think that the sunrise is beautiful. They just think a sunrise is actually a representation for a new workday. So they think a sunrise is painful. So subjective world is when I take my own raga dvesha, my own likes and dislikes, and I copy paste them over the world. And onto which I copy and paste them over, that object takes on the worth equal to the raga dvesha in my own mind. I'll rephrase that. The worth of the object equals the quality of my like and dislike which I gave it. If we have a Arnold Schwarzenegger when he was young, right? Some woman will copy-paste a raga dvesha, at least a raga, that will be very attractive, very handsome, right? With big muscles. That's called pratibhasika. But another woman who likes more like AFL players, right? More slim, she's going to copy-paste more in the lines of dvesha, right? Aversion, not so attracted. So that individual, Arnold, Mr. Arnold, he is value neutral, but the observer pasted a different value based on their own quality of raga dvesha onto the object. Okay? Simple. Now next line. Without raga dvesha, without likes or dislikes, equals objective world of God. God in brackets, Ishvara. I, long I, S-V-A-R-A. On top of objective, another two important keywords in any Vedanta class. First, Ishvara Srishti. And the second is Vya, V-Y long A, Vya, Va, V-Y long A, V-A, H long A, R-I-K-A.
What's long A?
There's a line on top of the A. Vyavaharika. See how I say Harika? That's long A. So Vyavaharika. That's why I say long A. So Ishvara Srishti and Vyavaharika. Okay, so what is objective world? Objective world is sunrise equals sunrise. Tree equals tree. A rainbow is a rainbow. In other words, I didn't put any kind of personal feelings or thoughts. I just mentioned what is. sunrise. That's it. Another example of pratibhasika and vyavaharika would be, if I look at a rainbow, right? This is pratibhasika example. I go, oh my God, God is so happy today, right? Rainbow, God is happy. I actually had this from my own childhood. I thought that rainbow means God is happy, so I was also happy then. An objective view or a vyavaharika would be this, which I observe, is refraction, deflection of light within water droplets, creating a multicolored circular arc. Right? I just mentioned a scientific version of a rainbow. Why? Because this is the case. This is how a rainbow is created, by reflection, and deflection of light in water droplets. So this is called vyavaharika, objective reality. So, or death equals death. That's a good example of vyavaharika. Versus death equals fear, mystery. Don't speak about it. That's jiva srishti.
So nuclear explosion equals nuclear explosion.
That's a good one.
Sorry, I'm going for the negative here.
You know, it's so funny. I was looking at many nuclear explosion videos recently on YouTube. I was like Castle Bravo. It was supposed to be a 5 megaton explosion, but one of the particles, when the neutron hit it, it changed the structure of it, and it was a 15 megaton explosion. So it was a big accident. You know, it was 3 times bigger. Yeah, so nuclear explosion. That's the kind of videos I watch. Okay, Vedanta only works in mode of vyavaharika. It will not work as long as there is excess pratibhasika. Okay? Why not? Because if someone comes in with a whole bunch of pratibhasika attributes, then whatever you say to them, they're going to interpret it in their way. You heard us, you even have your own family or your own friends. You tell them one thing, but then they relay it back to you totally different. There's a story in a Chinese story where you have 30 kids, and then you tell the kid in the front the story, and then each one of them retells it to the kid behind. You go all the way to the back and you say, so what's the story? Totally different. That's called pratibhasika, right? So here's the instruction. Move from jiva srishti to ishvara srishti to asrishti, no creation. Asrishti means Brahman. From jiva srishti to ishvara srishti to asrishti. What does asrishti mean? No creation. Like right now, if I say to you no creation, you probably ask, what does that mean, right? First of all, I said consciousness when I say no creation. There is no such thing as creation, because to say creation implies a creator, and then we have a Advaita problem. So, just a simple method of explaining. No creation means, okay, let's put it creation method, right? Creation means this, pot. Okay, this pot is form. It surely looks created. But to whom? To you, from that point of view. What if you were now to be an ant? Would this still look like a pot? No. So then who's right? Are you or the ant right? That's what we call about mithya. It all depends from which point of view you're looking at it from. So because both you and the ant who's looking at this are both also clay, then what is there other than clay? So then can I say there's creation? No, because both, there's only clay. But if I separate myself and I think I am other than whatever if I say I'm other than you, then of course there is creation of individuals, trees, clouds, sun, and so on. But if I change my focus from form, nama-rupa, into that which underlies nama-rupa, Brahman, consciousness, then automatically I can no longer say there's creation, there is only this. Okay? So that's what asrishti means. Okay, now let's get real about one thing. I just said jiva srishti to ishvara srishti to asrishti. This takes a lifetime. That's why it says here sharira vimokshanat. Okay, sharira vimokshanat. How long does one have to get to manage their raga dveshas until the fall of their sharira, their body. Okay? So this is a lifelong project. Handling raga dvesha. Why? Because we have lifetimes of imprints from past incarnations of raga dveshas, which are pulling us in one way or another, right? So this is a lifelong project. Now, I'm going to bring out the good news. I did not say, this is the good news, I did not say you're supposed to eliminate all your raga dvesha. I just said before, this is a lifelong project. Now I'm saying you're not supposed to eliminate all raga dvesha.
Just change the form.
Wait. Why? Because think about your body. What do we say about it? I'm healthy. Is your body really healthy 100%? Never. You look at it under a microscope, it's constantly being attacked by microbes, and cancerous cells at any one moment are constantly being digested by the enzymes of the white blood cells in order to prevent the body from being sick. And yet you call yourself healthy. Why? Because you are sufficiently healthy to be able to do what you need to do. Similarly, I cannot get rid of all my raga dvesha. I need to sufficiently manage them so that I am not disturbed by their strong hold on my behavior from one place to another. That's why the idea of total elimination of vasanas, raga dvesha, is unrealistic. All you need to do is just sufficient, so that it doesn't steal all my time into the pursuit of my raga dvesha. Okay? Even chapter 3, we had Krishna say that you can't wipe them all out, impossible, but you can manage them. That's the good news. The good news is you don't need to work your whole life just on raga dvesha, just enough. And you know what enough means. I don't know. Nobody knows. This is personal enough. And this we call yuktaha. So, what is a yuktaha? A yuktaha is that one who has or is spending time managing a raga dvesha. They become an integrated person. What is an integrated person? One who is not over predisposed to one side or the other. They're balanced. And this person alone is deserving of being called a human being. In verse 13, there was the last two words of verse 13 were Muhyanti Jantava. Okay, Muhyanti means confused, and Jantavaha means creature. That means if my raga dveshas are not handled, Lord Krishna calls those ones as Muhyanti Jantavaha, confused creatures. Now, it's not meant to insult, it's a very strong message. If I'm acting based on impulse, constant raga dvesha fulfillment, how can you call me a human being? It's like an animal, basically. A confused creature who doesn't know what needs to be done. Therefore, muhyanti jantavaha. So for that reason, we say a yuktaha alone is worthy of being called a human being. Okay? And that person alone who is integrated is qualifying for Vedanta. So that means, what does integrated mean? Emotions do not control my life, but I have ownership of my emotions. You know, when we say control yourself, we don't say, hey, think rationally, go to the web, Wikipedia, and look at what you need to do. No, we're saying that on the basis of over-expression, overabundance of emotionality occurring in that person at that time. So we say control yourself, right? So yuktaha is one who is under self-control of their emotions. Let's put a formula to this, and then we'll summarize verse 23. Okay, formula goes like this. Self-control, above self-control we can put manage likes and dislikes, because that's what self-control is, managing likes and dislikes. Arrow allows, above the arrow put allows, comprehension of self-knowledge. So managing raga dvesha allows comprehension of self-knowledge, arrow, above the arrow put happens within, that's above the arrow, happens within intellect. That's the new line now. The happens within the intellect. So where does self-knowledge happen? In the intellect. Arrow, now after the intellect, arrow made, above the arrow put made possible by controlled emotions. So the last thing, so the first thing is what? Self-control. The last thing is controlled emotions. You see that? Now, so what does that mean? Proper managed emotions are what? The cause which prevents. Okay, emotions give birth to raga dvesha. So that means if my emotions are out of control, then I'm going to have raga dvesha overwhelming me, preventing assimilation of self-knowledge, which cannot happen in the intellect. Why? Because my emotions are mismanaged. So it goes back to what we call yuktaha, integrated person, one who doesn't allow their emotions to constantly sway them from left to right. Okay? So all raga dvesha is just an overwhelm or unnatural emotions about things. Actually, let's read verse 23. So we just completed verse 23. The one who is able to master the force born of anger and desire here in this world, before released from the body, is a karma yogin or a yuktaha, means a wise person. He or she indeed is a happy person. Okay? So all it's saying is the one who has managed the raga dvesha while living is indeed happy. Yonta sukontara ramaha tantar jyotirevayaha sayogi brahma nirvanam brahma bhuto dhigacchati. Jnanam palam, the benefit of having performed the necessary skills in verse 22 and verse 23, leading to what? What benefit? That will now be talked about in verse 24. So by this stage, the yogi, the wise person, yogi doesn't mean a one who is good at yoga. In this context, it means a jnani, a wise person, okay? So by this stage, a yogi has taken care of their discipline, meaning what? Managing raga dvesha, and no more emotional leakages. Emotional leakages are those reactions which cause regret later on or are just out of alignment with reality. When somebody screams too much or somebody does something that's inappropriate, we call that emotional weaknesses or emotional disbalances or emotional leakages. Why? Because the emotional system has superseded the intellect, thus the intellect wasn't available at that time, so it couldn't discriminate what do I really have to do, this or this or this, right? Emotion high, intellect low. That's common. That's why we can fall in love so easily, because there's so much, what? Estrogen, testosterone, oxytocin, dopamine, serotonin. All of these overwhelming emotions are going through the body, leaving no or little space for the intellect, and the intellect is unable to really look at the person in its true light, and so they only find out later on the truth of the matter, once the emotions come down. Okay, so what is a life like for one who has undergone all of the steps in verse 22 and 23? What's the life like for that one? So this we're going to answer in yaha, antaha, sukkaha. Okay, so the inner essence of that person is sukkaha, happiness. Okay? So one who has undergone all of the steps in verse 22 and 23, the mental preparedness, that is, managing raga dvesha, that is, their antaha, you've heard of antaha, antaha karana, antakarana means the innermost cause, the innermost instrument. They are happy with themselves. That means I am happy with myself. So we could translate yaha antaha sukhaha, I'm happy with myself. Okay? Which we can say all entertainments are within myself. YouTube is in me. All of Saturday night movies are in me. All of the potential dates are in me. All of the computer games are in me. All sports are in me. All of the things, all food is in. So all those objects which we use to get entertainment from in this world, all of those objects are unnecessary to get entertainment for a yogi, for a jnani, because they are entirely happy with themselves. Why do some people travel? Never say all, but just some. They want something, right? Why do you travel? There's a goal. You have a goal. You have a vision. How about those tourist travels? Take pictures. Niagara Falls. What are you going to learn? Tick, 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 tick. So in other words, I'm using my 5 senses, right? God-given 5 senses, and using them to, enjoy myself. And, maybe that's going to lead to something. Maybe you're going to show the picture to someone and, they're going to like it, and then you start a friendship. So we can't ever, negate something as absolute no. But the entertainment, nevertheless, is the drive for the person traveling. For some of them, not all. Right?
Most people do because they want to get a story. They want to build a story.
Yeah. It's so funny on a Friday or Saturday night, right, when everyone's gone home, you can probably bet, at least, to be safe, 50% on the cars on the road are going somewhere. Going somewhere, right? For some fun. Especially if it's a young male, right? Or high heels, skirt. I'm going somewhere. Now you times this by millions and millions of times a day. How much petrol and gas and coal and mental resources are going from being ripped off from Mother Gaia Earth just to satisfy mismanaged raga dveshas? Yeah. See how it's connected? Okay. So let's put a conclusion to this. A wise person, a yogi that is, a jnani, can be with or without objects without losing one's sense of freedom. Now that's the important part. It's easy to be with objects, right? And then get lost, lose oneself in objects. You heard that phrase? I lost myself in entertainment. Today we have youngsters who can play games like StarCraft and just time flies by. Just like 10 hours, you don't even eat, you don't even realize you're hungry. So I lose myself. But a wise person never loses themselves because they're so well rooted in I. Impossible, no way.
So a wise person can be with or without objects?
Without losing one's sense of freedom. While an ajnani, a non-wise person, is with or without objects, but loses themselves in it. Not always. I mean, we got smart individuals, right? And they're able to hold their ground and realize it all comes and goes. The one who is able to be with objects or without objects is a Brahma, we can put a name, Brahma Bhutaha. Brahma Bhutaha means I am Brahman, I am that which is full, whole and complete. Okay? Brahma Bhuta. So a yogi is Brahma Bhutaha. Or a yogi is identified with that. In other words, the yogi and Brahma Bhutaha are one. We're not even going to say identify with it, but they're the one and the same. So because the yogi is Brahma Bhutaha, that is full, whole and complete, what is there to be entertained by? Because all entertainments mean what? I'm not happy with myself right now. I feel empty. I feel lacking. I feel yearning for something. So give me some novelty, right? Give me a friend to talk to. Give me something to do. A yogi is one who is Brahma Bhutaha, thus does not seek worldly entertainments externally. All the entertainments are inside. And as Michael said, that entertainment which is inside can be attributed to Ananda. Okay? We don't even call it quality. If I said sattva, then I could say quality, but we can't say Ananda is quality.
Like we're talking here.
Are we talking about just contentment?
Discontentment. We're talking at this state where one has learned to overcome your raga, dvesha, who's become a jnani.
Yeah.
Okay, I've learned to control my emotions.
Yeah.
Then it says to be happy just within yourself, just being with yourself.
Yeah. Okay.
Just to be happy. But that doesn't mean I feel in everyday life to be sitting in one room by yourself.
No, it doesn't.
We just dull.
Because-
We just become dull.
We didn't say that.
I mean, it becomes it's not a way to live. So what
That's
we're
good.
saying is that no matter in what activity we engage in,
Yeah.
we're still happy and contented within oneself.
Super good translation.
Yeah.
So activity will continue.
Yep.
Okay, and the activity will bring series of ups and downs because that belongs to the order of reality of mithya. But despite that, there is total contentment because of knowledge, because of practice, that despite this, it doesn't touch me. This knowledge that this doesn't touch me, this increases. The more I start to inquire, like I just gave you an example, that the ultimate joy is always coming from here. It's never out there, right? In fact, I give that permission to have joy here. I give it permission. Okay, is that clear? Shall we ask that question again? How do we translate this practically? Okay, let's summarize what we just spoke of. How to translate this practically? Or let's interpret the statement. The interpretation is, 1, I deal with life which has ups and downs. That is experienced without a question. 2, despite that, I develop sufficient mental strength to deal with the ups and downs. And number 3, Purnatvam. How to gain Purnatvam? Self-knowledge. So in other words, you already have all the steps involved. We're just talking about Purnatvam, developing Purnatvam. The more it's developed, the more one is content with themselves despite ups and downs. Okay. Okay, so how long does this yogi live? This jnani? Until, we're not talking about a jivan muktaha. We're going to close here, right? How long does a jivan muktaha live? Until their prarabdha karma is finished. What this means, translating, is until all of their duties are finalized. Their business here on earth that was assigned is finished, sufficiently done. That's when death happens. So, some tribes celebrate death because they know the person is, spiritually evolving. But somehow in the West we kind of take it as a loss. But okay, that's fine. It's allowed to want to grieve. But also at the same time, if you have this knowledge of, you should understand that this is the prarabdha karma of the person, is expired, as it will for this one, for everyone, as it has for previous generations. So why look at it so dark? That should be a celebration, actually. Death is moving on. So a jivan muktaha, a wise person, continues being a wise person, continues being what a wise person is, that is, aham brahmasmi, despite the body falling away. So nobody really died. Why did nobody die? Because prior to physical death, the problem has been solved. And what is that problem that has been solved? The eye has been shifted from that which dies to that which never dies. So therefore, that which dies, when it dies, nothing really died, because I did the job before the body died. we'll put a 2-line summary to this. A Jivan Muktaha, while living, equals embodied consciousness. And upon death, unembodied consciousness. Just write unembodied consciousness. Now, next to unembodied, you can even put a faint cross over unembodied, because there's no need to even say unembodied consciousness. It's just consciousness. Okay. Now, this unembodied consciousness, we can equate, or just consciousness, we can equate to, before we say that, what happens to Jivan Muktaha? Brahma Nirvanam. You heard of the word nirvana before. Okay? Whenever you hear the word nir, like nirvikalpa, kalpa means thought, so without thought. Nirvanam means without parts. So this is describing Brahman. Brahman is that which has no parts. Advaita, in other words. So what happens to a Jivan Muktaha? I'll use this word and I'll explain it next week. And we're going to talk about this word. Merge. Now put like big asterisks around the word merge and due for next week, because this word can be misinterpreted. The Jivan Muktaha merges with Brahman, which is Nirvanam. Forever, permanent. Sarve bhavantu sukhinaha, sarve santu niramaya, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschit dukkha bhag bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.